I'm really happy today to be chatting to Valerio Sudrio, Director of Product Management at Usercentrics, a consent management platform for both web and apps. So thank you, Valerio, for joining me today for this fireside chat.
Thank you, Kristan. Good to be here. Yeah.
It's really nice to talk to you. So I guess as a starting point, would love to dive into kind of first question of, in your own words, Valerio, what is a CMP? We talked about consent management platform, but what is a CMP? And then maybe if you want to as well, talk about what is TCF while we're doing all these all these different words and whatnot.
Magic acronyms that are coming up suddenly to all the gaming industry. It's like, what the hell is going on here? So CMP stands for Consent Management Platform. What does it mean? The tool is basically, I simplify it, is like a bouncer for user consents. What consents? So it basically is the consent to be tracked by third-party technologies that you might have installed in your app. As any game developer knows, in order to run your game, you need many third-party technologies. Well, the regulation, not from today, but actually from 5 years ago now, says that anytime you have a third-party technology accessing your users' data, especially personal identifiable information. I won't get into the details, but to give you an idea, for example, already the IP address, the location, the device, serial ID number, etc., they are all classifiable as PII. Anytime you use these tools, you need to collect the user consent. But here comes the trick, because many say, okay, I just need a banner. So the CMP is a banner, basically. Not quite, because beside collecting this consent, we need to store it for a period of time so that anytime a regulator comes in, you are able to prove that the consent was given or show that it was not given, but also pass this consent to third-party technologies that are running into your app and making sure that they listen to this this signal, let's say, that we pass them, and they act accordingly. And this is the tricky part, actually, and then links to TCF, actually, because there is a topic of languages, let's say, of signals that needs to be passed. Many third-party SDKs now over the years have developed their GDPR API or CCPA API, so the regulation API, so that the CMPs can send the signal directly to them. Others actually, with the IAB, said, well, we need something a little bit more understandable across all the programmatic value chain, because there is a big need from the advertisers that they want to actually approve that this consent was given before even purchasing, for example, ad spaces. And that's where basically TCF came from. There's been various iterations, various back and forth with the regulators, as you might know, around this, that is factually a string. So that contains all the information, a string that can be understood by all the technologies that are part of this TCF, a transparency and consent framework that was invented a couple of years back by IAB. Now we are at the version 2.2, which has brought in some improvements, etc. I won't go into the details, a little bit too technical, but what you need to know, or what the audience needs to know, is basically that this is a useful solution to make sure that the consent choice from the users is then understood by all the participants to the TCF, I call it community or club, etc. And I will dig deeper into that, into the benefits, but fundamentally this allows also the advertisers from the other end of the spectrum to actually see that the consent was given. And this is very, very important.
So for TCF, and I know Usercentrics are part of the TCF vendor group from IAB, AdInMo are as well. When I've tried to describe TCF, this is a question, by the way, but when I've tried to describe TCF to folks, I kind of describe it as, it's like supply chain management, right? It lets everybody in the chain, from the user to the app to to AdInMo to upstream buyers all the way to the original ad buyer. It lets them all know that consent was given, and that that it gives them that follow through. Is that a safe way to describe it, or is there a better analogy I could use?
I would say it's pretty a good way to describe it is fundamentally it's like attaching an extra layer of information to the data you pass. So it's users' data, consented or not consented. This is what the CMP, but also TCF does fundamentally. So it enriches a little bit the message that arrives. Yeah, fundamentally, I would say a pretty good explanation, let's say.
Awesome, thank you. So you mentioned a second ago that a lot of app developers and game developers think, well, I just popped up a banner with a do you consent, yes, no, and that's good enough, right? And and that's not right. So beyond that kind of thing, what are some other myths and barriers that that app developers and game developers might already be experiencing around collecting consent and sending consent, whether it's, I don't need it, or, I'm already doing it, it's good enough. And why do you think game developers to date haven't been as excited about using a CMP as you and I both are?
Yeah. I mean, the legal part is never so exciting. So I joined Usercentrics 3 years ago, and I was at Google before, so I was on the other side. And when I joined, I was very intrigued by this because I saw that there was a big change coming. I think a change for good, because we want to be good citizens of the world, and we want to make sure that the privacy of users are respected, because users are ourselves as well. So I really believe in this. You and I and our kids and everyone deserves the privacy and deserves the right to say, okay, I want my data to be shared for getting, I don't know, a better game experience, or getting special discounts, getting more personalized experience. But I want the power to say so. I don't want you to take my data and send it to a random company. I don't name any country for being politically correct, but
who knows? Exactly. Yeah, who knows where your data is going? Yeah.
However, I was surprised when I joined, because I was kind of new to the mobile industry, in the sense that I didn't know many people, but I knew the advertising part. So I was going around and say, hey, have you already solved for CMP, for GDPR, and so on? Yeah, all good. Or no, we don't need the CMP. I spoke with my lawyer. We don't need it. And I was like, this is kind of odd, because I'm reading the regulation. It says all devices, not only web. Some were thinking, this is just for web. This is a problem for web technologies, not for app technologies, etc. So that was the first myth, the first big myth that slowly started collapsing, because the regulators starting going after mobile apps. There have been few cases also in France with big publishers being fined. There was not so much enforcement so far for the reasons, for various reasons. The main one that I personally believe is that the regulators themselves didn't know the technology so well, so they needed some further study on what is an SDK, how an SDK operates, because fundamentally, if you know the technology, you know that actually an SDK could potentially track much more personal data and much more in details than a web technology, because a mobile, you carry it with you, so you basically can do a lot of tracking. But I was surprised that there was such a big pushback from the industry, but this was the first myth. The second is, I just need a privacy policy and a banner. That was also a myth. So here we are already next level, someone who thought about this, but then decide, okay, just a privacy policy is fine. The problem with that is that this banner was actually not storing any consent, which is a requirement from GDPR. You need to store the proof for audit trails purposes and so on, and was not correctly passing this consent across to the other technologies. And as you know, what happens in mobile, SDK starts firing regardless of your banner. So if you say the user are given consent to privacy policy or not, the SDKs are already activated and collecting all the information for good purposes or not so good purposes. There's not the law that, let's say, doesn't care about that. Fundamentally, we say as marketeers or people in advertising say, I mean, this is good for the users. We want to give personalized experiences. The law says, I don't care. if it's for marketing purposes, for making money, you need the consent. But this was the second big, let's say, myth. What I just need a banner with a privacy policy and so on. Also there, if you dig deeper, then if you look into the privacy policy, often not all the technologies were there, etc. Another another big problem I saw, it was a big disconnect between the legal and the tech teams. So sometimes the legal knew about this, but they were going to the tech team, say, hey, we need the consent solution. They were like, what for? Yeah, because we track users' data. You need to tell me what technologies are you running in my app. And they're like, no, we are not tracking users' data. So there was a big back and forth like that. That was also I also encountered a lot. So I would say these are the big myths. And finally, I would say these are the big myths. And then there is a big fear. And the big fear is fundamentally that installing the CMP, you're going to crash your game and you're going to crash the user experience. Everyone hates that. And I felt that when I arrived, it's like, no, there is no way I'm going to put a banner on my game, ruining the gaming experience, and we were like, well, I actually understand them, because I understand the game developers invest so much money and time into designing a cool game, we have artists. I mean, the studios, there are literally artists that, I'm Italian, I appreciate beauty, and sometimes some games many games are really beautiful, and then you need to stick this ugly banner on the game because of regulations and so on. So there was a big fear that this will ruin the experience. And actually, since the market was not ready yet in 3 years, this is what at Usercentrics from product side we try to focus a lot on. How to make sure that the CMP doesn't crash the game, that the Unity SDK, for example, is stable, that is flexible enough that you can customize your banner, that doesn't create disruption to the journey. And maybe, as I will speak later, you also make some extra money, which is not bad. So this is a little bit the story, but as you can see, there are a lot of myths around CMP. But now there are still these myths. The difference is that Google said, hey guys, from 16th of January, you need a CMP. But this hasn't changed the perception, I think, because it's like, what is a CMP? No, guys, I cannot do this, you know?
It's interesting you're talking about, I completely agree. I mean, I think, especially when you're talking to game designers, and I know Usercentrics, you guys, your technology works on websites and apps, and, you know, from an AdInMo perspective, we're not talking as much about that today with you, but when you talk to game designers, you know, compliance isn't sexy. It's not fun from a game designer perspective. But I think, you know, maybe the way we have to change that conversation as an industry to game designers and game developers is, but user experience is what game development is all about, game design is all about. And that user experience isn't once you're in the game and actually playing, it goes back to the menu system. It goes back to the first time you launched that game. And, you know, as an industry, we can all work together to make that experience good. And it's not, you know, and that experience, you know, it's mostly about fun. I agree for gaming. But you touched on something earlier, which I think is also important. As parents, as humans, as good citizens, part of that experience as well is making the player feel like they can trust that their data is being used correctly as well. So that's, I think, all part of it that we have to change that conversation.
I want to touch on this trust point. I think this is the keywords, trust, because the keyword, because actually we see many reports, we saw many analyses saying that actually trust is becoming a factor also on mobile. We saw reports also from Google and Deloitte a couple of years back measuring actually the impact of trust and seeing if users didn't feel safe about privacy, they will delete an app. So so that's, you cannot delete a website, but you can delete an app if you don't feel safe about it. So that's actually a big impact on mobile. But I think if you this movement of users willing to be to trust the game, or the app in general, or the website, to trust any tool they interact with, it's becoming more and more important, and it's bringing more and more relevance. And this translates not only, and we discussed this many times, not only on giving consent and feeling that you are in control of your privacy, but also in the overall experience of the game. We fixed that with improving the UX and so on, and over the years, now the games look really trustworthy and so on. But I think we were talking also about the advertising. How users are tired of shitty advertising.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is also a part of it. It's part of the trustworthy experience, feeling safe, feeling cared of. I think it's important topic.
Yeah, and you were talking a moment ago when you joined Usercentrics and your understanding of the regulatory framework, and you used a term that I really liked. You said change. You thought change is coming, right? And in my experience as a founder, one of the things I've learned, I've made a lot of mistakes, but one things I have learned, at least from all my mistakes, is that you can be right, but you also have to be right at the right time. And I think the timing, it just feels like this is such a perfect time now to be having this conversation. Because before, as you said, for all the different barriers and myths around CMPs gave developers a way to kind of put their heads in the sand and ignore that this change was coming. But not only was the change coming, the change has come, right? So I'd like to talk a little bit about, if you're okay, in May of this year, and you know far more about this than me, Valerio. So I'm gonna tee this up for you, and I'd love you to kind of give me your thoughts. As in May, Google, the biggest destination for ad dollars globally, announced that by January of next year, that websites, games, apps, anybody using any of the Google monetization platform, so AdSense, Ad Manager, AdMob, all those sites, all those apps are going to have to use a Google certified CMP with TCF when serving ads to GDPR countries, so EU and UK users. So to use a kind of fun phrase here, I'm assuming this is game changing. Would you agree, and why?
As game changing, I mean, as I said, as I mentioned before, this is not something that comes out of the blue. If anyone listening has been following the whole evolution, you could see that little by little on the Play Store, but also on Apple, like new rules about privacy, and then this move. Actually, this move, I would say, from Google, it's not like let's say only coming from Google out of goodwill, even though Google tries to do the right thing. I'm an ex-Googler, so I know, but also because the regulators are becoming more and more pressing. They're like, okay, this is it. We need more control. You guys at Google also need to be responsible for the publishers that work with you. I suspect, because regulators cannot go after all single small studios and so on, so they're asking also Google for a help. But at the same time, there are also the advertisers. Also, the advertisers are, before they were like, okay, send me the consent. And in the past, it was like, okay, here you go. Banner and so on. Now it's like, prove it. Like, I want to see that you actually got the consent. And I think in the future, it could evolve in a way like, how did you collect this consent? Did you use a proper CMP? Or you use the homemade, non-approved CMP, and that's why Google is saying, we only will approve CMPs that we verified. So now there is a verification process. Usercentrics is certified by Google, so other CMPs as well. And this is the reason why they actually now asking publishers to actually use specific approved CMPs. Again, it's not a surprise. We have been telling, you talked about timing, and I remember when I started going around, the Pocket Gamer and all the events, and telling, hey guys, CMP anyone?
I got to be honest with you, Valerio. I think
good.
you and I started talking a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. You
And at that
remember?
point, I was saying, you've got a really hard job here.
Yeah. You
I got to
remember?
be honest, Valerio, I'm very jealous of you because you have a much easier job now. The world has come to you, and that's an amazing place to be as a company and for the technology you guys are doing. It's perfect timing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned as entrepreneurs, because I consider myself an entrepreneur inside an existing company. Usercentrics is already successful on the website part of things, but when I joined, we said, okay, we need to do something about apps. But you know, it was also internal convincing, saying, hey, actually, this is growing. So I had to prepare myself as a product lead as well to show actually these are the signals. And signals were very strong. So the movement of the industry, and I would say we actually got already customers in the non-gaming part. The non-gaming part had already the web presence, so they knew about this, and they say, okay, it's going to come. So we signed very large non-gaming apps. Gaming was the most,
most resistive to this.
Most
absolutely.
And rightfully so, for the reasons I mentioned, usability, UX, fear of churn, etc.
Yeah, and there's I think in a lot of things, whether it's parenting, whether it's at the global levels, there's always this concept of carrot and stick, right? And so the stick has been this fear of what's going to happen from a regulatory and framework perspective, and we've seen some of the kind of the big cases out there, Facebook and the huge fine that was given to them, and I think that's an example of the stick side of it. Let's talk about the carrot, though, and or the green cash smelling carrot of this. Our own experience working with Usercentrics, with some of the games that work with AdInMo, we've seen in EU territories for EU audiences. We see that two of the key metrics that we look at when a player gives consent. Two key metrics we look at is the CPM, and everybody understands CPMs and what are the impacts on that, but also the bid rates. So when we present a user, when we present an in-game ad placement to a potential ad buyer, are they willing to buy against that or not? And the answer is, if we don't have GDPR consent, if we don't have TCF pass through, bid rates can be as low as zero. Literally, we have some places where we just can't monetize users in the EU without that TCF. So bid rates can be anywhere from infinite. I'm trying to look at an uplift here to upwards of 10x the bid rates. And CPMs, we see CPMs between 2 times and 3 times higher for those users that have passed a consent and TCF via the Usercentrics CMP to AdInMo to pass upwards. Is that in the norm for you guys? Work with tons of apps and games. Is that in the norm? Are we at the low end? Do we still have some work to do? What's your kind of feeling?
No, actually, it's in the norm. So the positive impact, we saw it with all the games that have implemented us, and that's pretty cool because again, talking back and when we were believing it, but we're running after. We knew that actually there was a demand for this because we're speaking with the DSPs and so on, and all the ad networks, etc. So actually, yes. We knew also that Europe doesn't represent a big chunk of traffic for many games. So some were like, yeah, maybe, but okay, we're making money anyway for the large markets in the US and Asia. So maybe I'll deal about this later. But little they knew, because I've been working now with a very large publisher. One of them I can name is Homa Games. We published a report with them, and we actually said, okay, let's prove this hypothesis. I am sure that if you install a CMP and pass the TCF string, you're gonna see good results. So we did like a bet. No, let's try. And then they did a lot of A/B testing on multiple games. On the largest game, they tested with 30 million downloads. They saw an uplift of 10% on their ads LTV, which is the metrics that they look at, which means then them to implement our tool into all their games, etc. But in smaller games, we saw also peaks of 200%, 300% on LZTV. Obviously, it really depends on the game, on many factors, as you know, but fundamentally, we always seen a very positive impact on the monetization thanks to this. And thanks to the fact that, as I mentioned before, the CMP is our CMP can be customized. You can run A/B testing, so to improve also the opt-in rates. Big question I get sometimes: oh, what's the opt-in rate you can get? Like, we cannot guarantee an opt-in rate. We are not controlling the users to click yes or no. What we always say, you need to have a flexible enough solution to help you build the experience that gives confidence to the users to say yes, and that gives the users, let's say, the value exchange, so they understand actually what they're getting in return. So if they understand
a little bit more about, oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, Valerio. Sorry to cut in. Go ahead.
No, I'm just finishing. Like if they see that they're getting some value and you can clearly communicate this, even using this little banner up there, the effects are very positive. We saw some games reaching even 96% opt-in rate, so which is pretty high.
That's incredible. I think the industry standard is, depending upon which
lower than 90%.
Yeah, wow. I say depending upon which metric you look at, I think the industry standard opt-in rate is 20%-ish for people that are just kind of generally kind of just in the worst possible way, as you said, and not actually. And that's where I'm kind of curious now. So talk a little bit more. And that I think that is one of the fears for game developers. They hear that, oh, industry standards around about 20%. Why would I want to do this? Because of the impacts on retention, et cetera. So talk a little bit more about other best practices that developers can do working with Usercentrics with the CMP to optimize that experience, to increase opt-in rates, to decrease any kind of negative impacts to their metrics. So what are some of the kind of learnings that you guys have had with Homa, with other developers you've worked with, to say, here's the best way to do this, or here's some frameworks by which you should think about that?
So one thing I need to really tell everyone as a disclaimer: when you use TCF, there is a big limitation, and the limitation of TCF is on the UX part. So TCF has a very rigid set of rules. So now you should build the banner, which is pretty tricky, because obviously you cannot build. You could, but then you need to get your CMP approved by them again. It's a long process, etc. So we usually use the standards that they tell us. But around these standards, that's where you can play. So you can play, and then it depends also on the local regulations, on what they allow you to do or not. And by local, I don't mean European, but even in France, in Italy, in Germany, there could be different nuances that can allow you to change something. But fundamentally, it's about the journey. So the journey that you build. Some of our games, for example, are shutting all the SDKs down until the gamer tests the first level. And then gets the aha moment, and then the banner appears. Some others are showing it right at the beginning, but playing a lot with the A/B testing, as we were mentioning, which is very important, and changing the text, changing a little bit the colors, branding it with the game. So little changes sometimes bring a lot of impact. Also, because you cannot make huge changes to a small banner.
When Apple first rolled out the SK ad network and the kind of the requirement to have a pop-up for tracking there, a lot of developers played around with when to put that pop-up up. And one of the things that some developers kind of landed on, and I'm curious, something you just mentioned there, and it's always felt like a smart thing to me, it's just like your reaction, as you said, is to wait some period of time, let the player, switch off everything else. As you said, maybe your monetization is a little bit lower to start with, but let them get through the first level or the first day or whatever, that kind of, to the point that they've invested in the game, right? And then you put that little pop-up up, and it's the same way that you do with, is it okay for this game to send you alerts or whatever? You shouldn't hammer them with 5 different consent pop-ups at the right start. Let them get excited about the game before asking for these things. That feels like one of the possible kind of best practices that you guys are seeing.
Yes, within the technical limitation of obviously, if you can not run SD specific SDKs at the beginning, because then there are some tricky aspects to it. But some have tried it, and it was successful for them. I really need a solution that allows you to test and maybe us make releases and change without launching new apps or new builds. So that's also very important. Yeah.
What about the language, the actual language that you as Usercentrics are presenting? And as you said, there are restrictions around what you can do there, but I assume that you guys have done a lot of work to try to make this language as user-friendly as possible, right? As not scary as possible for that user, so they kind of understand and feel that they're invested in their privacy and trust there too. Is that true? Is that something that you guys have been doing?
Yes, not directly in the sense we don't recommend the text. We always leave to our customers the choice to actually craft the text as they like. But we saw sometimes the simplest one working very well. It's like, this game is free thanks to advertising.
Yeah,
this actually works pretty well for many. So like the case that I mentioned, the 96%, we're using like simple message like this. People get it. They know. I mean, they know. Many people know. So so that worked out pretty well. Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited about the partnership that we have with Usercentrics. We have several games that AdInMo work with that are now integrating or have integrated the Usercentrics CMP, and we're starting to collect data. As I said, this is some of the positives that we're already seeing from this. I think we're going to, at an upcoming conference, we're going to be talking more about that together with one or more game partners too. But I think that's I think that's really exciting, and I think it's it's the right thing for the industry for us to be here now. What are your thoughts? I mean, what are your thoughts about just kind of Usercentrics, gaming, AdInMo? I guess what's your view of how AdInMo may work differently with Usercentrics versus maybe some of the other ad monetization partners you work with? Any thoughts there?
No, I think first, I kind of mentioned before, this concept of working towards quality. And I think when we were discussing already, when we met you the first time a couple of years back at the conference, and I saw what you're doing, you work towards that, the quality of the ads, and like with premium partners, etc., which is fundamentally the same target that we have, because this signal is very much sought after by premium brands, premium advertisers. So that actually integrates the offer very nicely, because you now offer your solution, but on top of that, there is also the string powered by Usercentrics, the TCF string, that actually allows your customers to actually make more money, which is the most important thing. What I never participated so many talks in the gaming industry. I did more in the non-gaming for a simple reason, because I always said, I don't want to be the one pushing for the CMP, because I am selling the CMP, obviously. I want a game developer, as it will happen, to actually say what is the positive thing of using a CMP, because as we discussed, there were a lot of myths that needed to be debunked, and also some unknowns. Like, no one probably knew that actually installing a CMP, you can make some extra money. So it's a good return on the investment.
A lot more potentially. My view, and again, why I'm so excited about this relationship is, my view when I started AdInMo, my view has always been, we as a company and we as an industry should focus on the player first. So I know we're an ad monetization organization, but if we create a good player experience, a great player experience, then inherently the other stakeholders, the game developer and the advertiser, and hopefully AdInMo, will get a good experience out of that as well. And if the player has a shitty experience, then all the stakeholders are going to have a bad experience too. And so from the pitch of AdInMo has always been, in-game ads, we believe, is a far better experience than an interruptive interstitial video that just breaks the user game experience. And to that same thing, this is why I think Usercentrics relationship is so important, because it's all about the player, right? It is allowing the player to understand what's happening with their data, give them that trust. And like I said, already we're showing that when we give that player a better experience, the developer is making more money. The advertiser, and we haven't even talked about the advertiser journey at all, but advertisers are becoming a lot more concerned about ensuring that they're advertising to consented players, and that they do trust that consent, as opposed to an SDK just saying, yes, there was a flag there, consent, and who knows if the user properly consented. So I think that's really exciting. As you said, the end result for all of us is more revenue and a better player experience. So it's awesome.
Yeah, better quality of the ads, better playing experience.
Exactly.
More money for the publisher. I think it's a win-win.
Yeah.
But it's good for so the message is true that there is enforcement, and enforcements are never nice. I don't like enforcement personally. Probably you don't as well, Kristan, but it is what it is. But the message is like, is not negative. Actually, there is a positive outcome out of this, and actually there is the possibility of stepping up the game, let's say.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to kind of go back to. So we're in theory, we've gone through the questions here, Valerio. So this is our chance to kind of go back. And was there anything else that you wanted to touch on? Anything that you forgot, or I didn't ask you well, or whatever?
I have one point, because we kind of mentioned before, and there is a big confusion in the industry, and which is the difference between ATT and a CMP or privacy banner. So the ATT is not a legal banner, so it doesn't work. It doesn't cover you legally. It doesn't serve the purpose of a CMP, which is the GDPR, CCPA, because it's not only GDPR. Now will come in the US as well, this requirement, but we can speak about that in a few months. When you are on an Apple environment, you need an iOS environment, you need to actually have both together, which is a little bit more tricky. But alone the ATT will not cover for the CMP needs, nor the answers on the ATT will impact the answers on the CMP. They are not tools that can communicate to each other, at least for now. I don't know if in the future Apple will talk with CMPs and make the life a little bit more easy, but today you need the two banners, and that's why it's even more important to study the onboarding experience, which is yet another topic, but onboarding will be very relevant more and more, because there are so many permissions and asks that users are being asked that you need to craft them in the right way. But anyway, I just wanted to make this differentiation, because there is still this confusion about ATT being a GDPR-driven banner, which is not the case. It's an Apple.
I'm glad you did that, because you're right. There's a lot of confusion, and not just, the audience here that we're chatting to today are generally going to be game developers and publishers, but on the advertiser side as well, we see that same confusion, where we'll see things as we'll have a programmatic bidder saying, well, you're sending us a TCF string, but you're not sending us the IDFA, the device ID, for example. And why is that? And we've had to kind of dive into that same conversation to say, those are two different concepts. They're very related, but they're absolutely not the same thing and not the same consent. So I appreciate that you touched on that. Yes, there's still a lot.
The reason why is because if you say yes to legal banner, but then you say no to ATT, they will cut the IDFA anyway. So
yeah, exactly. So that's a good point. So no, thank you for diving into that. One thing I wanted to kind of go back to as well was just on the monetization side. And we're talking about the carrot side of this, and in the industry, whether it's the ad industry or the games industry, we kind of lump the EU countries and the US and Japan and maybe a couple other countries all into what we call tier 1 countries, right? And in theory, the user acquisition cost and the revenue that we get from those countries is all fairly similar, right? They're in a band that we call tier 1. But my unpleasant surprise over the last year or two has been, there isn't tier 1. There's the US and then the kind of and maybe Canada and Japan, a few others. And then there's all the EU countries, which when we look at it on an ARPDAU basis, so average revenue per daily active user, our EU countries look to us oftentimes like tier 3 countries in terms of the monetization that we get out of them because of the lack of consent, because of the lack of TCF. And, I kind of joke at our board level that, the UK should look to us on a per user basis. It should look like Canada, right? Or the US. We should make about the same amount of money. The UK to us looks like, I know, and again, I don't want to name out any particular countries, but it looks like some very low monetizing countries for us. And so until we get that TCF back in, then we look at it at a user level and like, right, that's a tier 1 country for us now. So I mean, it's just amazing how we can bring these users back into the monetization that we should be getting from them in these high value markets.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I felt always that was like a chicken and egg problem, like some publishers telling me, oh, but these are not important markets to us. We are not making so much money out of this. Well, guess why?
Yeah.
So maybe we found the little trick actually to increase the monetization on countries that, yeah, on paper it should be quite important, let's say.
Like I said, I am so I'm so happy, both for Usercentrics, also for AdInMo, but also for the industry. Back to that, it is timing. And again, I started AdInMo over 5 years ago now, and back to that kind of timing thing. I thought when I started AdInMo, I thought very quickly, same thing as you. I was kind of looking forward, and I thought, okay, regulatory frameworks, what the platforms, the messaging we're hearing from Apple and Google. Very quickly, we're going to be in a world where this consent is just going to be automatic, right? You're going to have to do it. And I've been shocked it's taken so long to get there, but we are pretty much there now. And at least it's now top of mind for developers. So it does feel like, it's so good to be doing this now and to be having these conversations and be able to talk about the positive impacts of this and not all the question about, oh, what's the negative impact? What's the impact on my D1 retention, crash rates, whatever. Now we can talk about, here's all the awesome aspects of this.
And I want to add also something that we were not we didn't know when we started talking, we didn't know about Google requirements or anything like that. So all the studies that we've done as Usercentrics, also with you from AdInMo, were done with this in mind, with this idea. There must be something good for, let's measure it.
Yeah.
A little we knew that actually Google would put this deadline. It's like sometimes, the timings are good, but I think it's also because we were following something that was very clear. As I was saying, the path was going into that direction. And now we are lucky to be in a situation where there is a deadline and an enforcement, but we also have a positive message for the developers, which is, don't worry, you're going to make more money with the CMP, but you need a good one. That's very important.
Well, Valerio, I'm really looking forward to catching up with you. This has been a fantastic chat. I really thank you for your time. I cannot thank you enough.
Likewise. It was a great chat. Thank you, Kristan.